discussion about the introduction concept, object-oriented concepts. In that regard, we will just begin our discussion with trying to understand what is a structure and what are the various key components a structure should possess, the need for the structures, the types of usage with respect to the structures, some of the quick example program which relates to the understandability about the structure. So let me just ask you a simple question. How exactly can we relate the structures and what's the difference between the structures and arrays? So most of us know the arrays are nothing but an homogeneous collection of similar elements which will have similar data types. So, programming language with the help of a C, we are trying to understand the procedural oriented systems, and we will try to have a quick review about the necessity of a structures in C. So, if I am just trying to compare arrays with structures, structures could be defined as an heterogeneous collection of data elements which will have dissimilarity with its declarations. So, what we mean by the dissimilarity with the declarations is about the data types which we are trying to embed with a structure. So here, the necessity and the need for the structure is illustrated in the slide. We are observing from the slide, there are cases where the value of one variable depends upon that of another variable. For example, if I'm just taking a variable which is declared as the integer type having values as d, m and y. So here the declaration d, m, y is representing the dates which is having the data type as integer, and the date could be programmatically represented by C, taking the advantage of the variables which is declared as per the example. And although these variables wouldn't be grouped together in the code, they actually belong to the same group which it is existent with. And here we could note the value of one variable may directly have an influence on the other two variables as well. So here, to understand specifically, let's just take one method by the name called as next underscore day. And here, the next underscore day aims at accepting the addresses of three integers, which is going to have a representation of date and the changes the date is going to possess for the next value which needs to be given. So let me just take a prototype declaration for this function that's given with this red colored blocking, which you people can observe as I have given a declaration void next underscore day, and within a brackets I've just passed the value there as int star int star int star. And this particular prototype declaration, I can just tell it's going to give a calculation about the next day according to the format of a date. Suppose I would like to just have a display done as 1st January 2002 as per the case 1 which I have taken as an example. We can write the function next day where the pointer variable d corresponds to the first argument in the function call. The pointer variable m corresponds to the next variable in the function call, and similarly the pointer variable with the value y corresponds to the third argument as per the declaration. Now I have just set the values of d as 1, set the value of m as 1, and I have just taken a value of y as 2002. So now I could see from this simplest form of the declaration, now d would become a value as 2, m will remain a value as 1, and y will remain the value as 2002. So what we are trying to convey as per the case 1 is, if we are going to have a calculation done for the next day, which is supposed to be the day d, the next value immediately which follows from y would be 2. And that's how we are trying to understand the necessity of this next underscore day function call. Now let me just take up case 2, and here in this case 2, I have just set the value of d, the variable d as 28, the variable m as 2, the variable y as 1999. And now if we are making a call to the next underscore day as a function call, now d will become 1, m will become 3, and y will be remaining as 1999. The simplest reason is the Feb month, if I just take the advantage of not a leap year, then I just have a value there as 28, and I will have the d, which is the next immediate followed value of 28 Feb, that is happened to the 1st March. So I will get m as 3, d will remain as 1, and y will be remaining as 1999. And now to have the understandability about the various types of representations, what a structure still can give to the programmers is, suppose if I just take d as 31, m as 12, and an year as 1999, I would like to set the value as 31st December 1999. And we make an invocation to the function call next underscore day again. Now we can understand d will now act or just have a value as 1, and m will become 1. That means I just skip from 31st December to 1st Jan. So the value there is first, which is 1 for d, Jan for a month, which I am just taking it as 1, and an year it is going to have a modification or a change. And now from 1999, I will have an year being represented as 2000. And as we can observe, the variables d, m, and y actually belong to the same group. I just repeat again. The variables d, m, and y actually belong to the same group. A change in the value of one may have a change with the value of the other two. So now, however, there is no language construct which actually places the variables with the same group, and thus the members of the wrong group may accidentally be sent to a function call. So here, let's just address this with an same examples which we had considered earlier, where I just take d1 with a value 28, m1 with a value 2, y1 with a value 1999. So that gives me the display as 28th Feb 1999. Similarly, I just take the next variable as d2, setting the appropriate conditions as 19th March 1999. And if I would like to give a declaration of making a call with a prototype, let me just call next underscore day, passing the variables as d1, m1, and y1. That's a perfect declaration which I can say the syntax is right. Now, the same way, I am trying to make a call by adding or by modifying the second argument as m2. So here I make a call with the D1, the variable M2 and a variable Y2. Here in this declaration, it's an incorrect set which is passed because we have understood from the previous sentences, we are going to have the change in value of one may change the value of the other two. So here my declaration with the second statement would give me an solution as D1 to be replaced with D2 to make the syntax right. So as we can observe from the above listing, there is nothing in the language which itself prevents the wrong set of variables by being sent to a function. However, the integer type variables which were declared in an example are only meant to represent dates which might be also sent to an respective function. Now let's try with an array to solve the problem of next day which we had seen with the previous example set. So to make a prototype, I just have defined a function call by the name called as same next underscore day, which is returning nothing, and it is having a value being added inside that function call of type integer, happens to be a pointer. Now let's declare date as an array of 3 integers. So I've given here int date of 3. I am assigning a value of 0th index as 28, the first index as 2, and a second index with a value 1999. And now this should give me a display as 28th Feb 1999. Now let us call the function where I am having a setting done with the value of indexed 0 with 1, the date indexed at 1 with a value of 3, and a date with the indexed 2 with a value as 1999. Although this particular method seems to work, it certainly appears unconvincing whenever I just make a call to the second prototype. So what's really happening and how does I treat this type of a declaration is a question which we have to address. So here, after all the integer array could be passed to a function, even if it is not necessarily helps us to represent the data, there is no data type for the date itself. However, we can see a solution with respect to this type of a problem by creating a newer data type called date itself. I just repeat, the array declaration had given a challenge to the programmers to create a newer data type by the name called as date, making use of a very important construct called as structures. Now, clearly to understand, we can just simply have a thought stating structures are nothing but heterogeneous collection of dissimilar elements having dissimilar data types. And the structures would give the programmers with the flexibility of grouping the related terms with one block, and then it is being connected to an heterogeneous collections. So now to represent a structure by the name called as date, I will always have a keyword associated with the name of a structure. So I use a keyword called as struct. So taking the syntaxes into account, we know like if I have to create a data type called as date, my declaration would be struct followed by date. And I have an opening and a closing parenthesis where I could give a declarations with an order mentioned in the program. So in this example, I am supposed to have D, M and Y as a variable representing date, month and year, and the day which corresponds here would be giving the users with two values of type integer, and M is again a two value, and Y I can just design it to have a storage done as four values. Now, the next day function will always accept the address of a variable possessing with a structure as a parameter, and its prototype declaration would be given as void next underscore day, and I pass a value over there defining struct date star. Now we just see here the role of assigning the value as 28, 2 and 1999. So here what I do is I just declare struct date D1, and then I am assigning a value to D1 identified with a variable called as D. So here D1.D is assigned as 28, D1.M is assigned with a value 2, D1.Y is assigned with a value as 1999. Then I make an invocation for the function call next underscore day, which is passing the address for D1. So here the variables d1.d, d1.m, d1.y will be initially set with 1, 3 and 1999. And since this function takes the address of an entire structure variable as a parameter at a specified time, there is no way through which the variables could be defined, the variables could be sent to the different functions. So here, just to have a simple understanding, a structure is a programming construct in C language which will allow us to put together variables that should be together. And the library programmers uses structures to create your data type. Whereas the application programs and other library programs makes use of this newly created data type by declaring a variable of the relevant type. So to understand it, I just created struct date, then I'm creating an instance or a variable by the name called as D1, which makes a recognition for referring to the new data type date. And structure has an associated functions with its function call, and all these associated functions would be addressed with the help of the operator called as ampersand. And finally, we can make an use of an operator called as dot to access all those variables which is defined inside the structure. And if I am just clearly mentioning the printf statement where I am aiming at displaying d1.d, d1.m, d1.y, I would get an answer upon execution as 31st December 2003. So now we can see here I will have the next day to be processed and I make a call. You can just note here there is next underscore day which is given as per the declaration passed with a variable d1. And we know from our previous understanding the function call next underscore day would represent or provide the programmers the display of D, M and Y set according to the condition. And we have here 31st December 2003. And the new value for D, M and Y would be now created, and we get an output of the next day as 1st Jan 2004. So we can note there all the values D, M and Y had reflected changes as per the creation of a newer data type. So now we have to know certain steps when we work with the creation of a new data type. And the creation of a new data type asks the programmer to follow three important steps. That's the first step we will observe, or we will put the structure definition and all those prototype declarations which are going to have an association with an header file. So if for the previous example, if I'm just taking it, I declare struct date and I pack D, M and Y inside the struct date, and I also mention the associated functions as void next day, which gets the next day and it returns the value as void. And similarly, I've just used one more function called as get underscore sys underscore date, and this aims at getting the current system date. And these are my first step declarations. So I just repeat again. When we work with the structures and we aim at creating a new data type, it needs to follow three clear-cut steps. The first step says put the structure definition and put the prototypes of the associated functions in one important file referred as an header file. And now whatever I declared here, the function calls, the structure declarations, everything is associated with a file by the name called as date.h. So here we can see the .h recognizes and suggests it's a header file which is created by the programmer. Now the step 2 says put the definition of the associated function in a source code and create a library. I just repeat again. Step 2 says put a definition of the associated functions in a source code and create a library. So here the file which contains the definitions and an associated functions are referred as date.h. Now I put all the necessary logic. I just put all the necessary values which represents the header file date.h. So I had used in date.h two important function calls called as next underscore day and get underscore sys underscore date. Now we observe with the function next underscore day, all those calculations of the date which should follow automatically the pointer variable p set according to the conditions. Similarly, the function call get underscore sys underscore date should determine the current system date by setting the pointer variable accordingly. And in our step 3, we provide all those header file and the library in whatever the media the programmers are asking and the programmers want to use the newly created data type. So here, let's just take a brief overview about the steps which were included with our discussions. So I have given here include date.h. That means in our first line of the code, if I have used hash include date.h, it indirectly calls the variables, it indirectly adds the prototype declaration which is defined by the programmer. Now inside the main, I just make a suitable statements where I should get a display of next date based on the calculations, and also I should get the system date in an appropriate format. Now let's just see in the step 2, we are declaring a variables for the newer data type. So the variable which I have declared here is D. Now in the step 3, I connect all put together. So my program becomes very compact, and whenever I am embedding a call to the associated functions and I pass the variable inside a source code, I just get a statement in this order. So I will have here in the main the declaration called as D, which suggests the creation of a new type called as date. Now, with the help of this variable D, I'm assigning 28 value to this date. For the month, I'm assigning 2, and for the year, I'm assigning 1999. Then immediately I just make call to the function call next underscore day. I pass the variable D. Now, in our step 4, I'm going to compile the source code to get an object. Whereas with our step 5, I'm linking the object file with a library provided by the programmer to get an executable or another library. That's all about creation of a newer data type, making use of structures. And now let's just move with the next important term associated with object-oriented concept, that's on procedures. So here in a procedural oriented programming system, the major focus is on procedures or functions. Whenever the user is being given with a problem statement and the user aims at providing a solution to the problem statement, the program which involves with this solution will definitely have a problem to be viewed as a sequence of things. Maybe the sequence of things could be reading, maybe calculating or processing, or maybe displaying or printing, and so on. When we have the number of functions written to accomplish the above mentioned task, we call the primary focus with an object-oriented programming is with creation of objects, whereas the primary focus on procedural oriented programming system, they rely with procedures or modules. And this approach, where the primary focus is given on procedures, we use a term called as POP, which is simply procedure oriented programming. And with procedural oriented programming, the main task is taken up first, and then it's been divided into the smaller values, logically having an independence with the components. And this in turn should provide a solution to the specified subtasks. For example, if I am just observing, there is a main function, and inside this main function, I have a function 1, function 2, and function 3. And now function 1 is making a call to the function 4, and function 3 is associated with function 5, whereas function 2 is associated with 4 and 5. Similarly, the function 4 is associated with 6 and 7, and function 5 is associated with 7 and 8. And now the program which are written with one or more functions, we refer with a procedural oriented programming, and here each procedure does some specific task, and we can see or observe the data is being processed and the data is being found with the local version and the data being found with a global versions. And with our procedural oriented programming, we can see procedure taking up or carrying out some specified task. Here, the data is passed openly and data is passed freely from one procedure to another procedure. And most importantly, the data elements are placed as a global values so that it could be accessible by all the procedures what a program is working for. And here, each procedure may have its own local data. So let's just observe here. We have got a global data. I have got for the function 1 its own local data. For the function 2 also it's having its own local data. And whenever we just declare a variable or a function above the main, we call all those declarations as a global declarations. And each global declared variable definitely will have a value associated with it, and that we call as a data. Now, there is one important drawback which we observe with the programming pattern, and that's nothing but when we work with an procedural oriented programming, that we always say data is not secure, and we always observe the data would be manipulated by any procedure which it is trying to connect with. So here the associated functions which were designed by the library programmer will not have any rights to work upon the data. However, there is going to be an increase with the complexity of the programs as it keeps growing in a larger way, and it keeps adding some complex values into the code. And with the procedural oriented programming, the compilers which aims at implementing will not have the security which is observed with a procedural oriented programming. And we know the POP system does not prevent unauthorized functions from being accessed, manipulated with the structure variables. So let me just take up an example here. Look at a situation from an application programmer point of view by considering an application of 25,000 lines in which variables of a structure may have used. And this 25,000 lines of declarations with respect to the variable is quite extensively used with the program. And during testing, if we are finding the date which I would like to have a representation of one among the variables, then I can have the faulty value which can be generated from the declared values. And now this faulty piece of code which causes the bug can be occurring anywhere in the program. Since we have a debugging which will involve a visual inspection of an entire code, and it will not be limited to the associated functions. So what I would like to convey from this example is, whenever we just work with some conditions and the conditions are represented in a wrong way, then it reflects the visual value at the time of debugging, where I see the representations of a value taking a wrong output to be displayed on the monitor. Now, specifically, the situation becomes worsened if an execution of a code is likely to corrupt the data which is conditional. So here, in this case, if we are having a declaration as if some condition, then increment a value for a month. Here, D is a variable of data structure. D.m will become 13. And this condition under which the bug is being found is tested when the programmer takes a compilation phase and tries to execute the code as per the declarations. And with our procedural oriented programming, if a function which is not the one which gets an intended associated functions will have a compilation time error being generated. And to ensure a successful compilation of the user's application code, the application programmer will be forced to remove all those statements that accesses the data members of the structure variable. And with this, the point I can just conclude when we work with a procedural oriented programming, there is a lack of data security, which could lead to a newer developmental system identified by the name called as object oriented programming system, or OOPS. And now, before I just begin with an object-oriented programming system, let's just work with some simpler creation of the structures, and we will observe the display operations, and also we will try to have a creation done with respect to the newer data type. I hope everyone has followed the session. Let me just take up a notepad here, and in this notepad I just take declare a structure. I repeat again, declare a structure which will give the display of values for an employee taken: employee name, employee date of birth, employee salary, employee email, employee ID, and set your values accordingly, where I would like you people to give me the display of at least the one employee record. That's your first question. And this question you can just take it for working at home. The second question which I would like to ask for you people is declare a structure by the name called as student, and student should possess the fields as student USN, student name, student semester, student branch, student marks for 3 subjects. And this, I expect you to just create a new data type and have values being displayed for at least 3 students belonging to the class. And these 2 exercises, I expect you people to just give me